So, I had this real privilege of being the principal of the Green School in Bali, which I do believe really is the model for environmental sustainability in education. And during the course of this presentation, again, I don't believe that the Green School can be copied anywhere in its entirety, but I do believe that we can take little bits of this and really make a difference in every walk of life. So before I actually talk about the Green School, because I'm in the education field, I think it's important, just the way my mind works, is that I want to know, whatever is happening at the Green School, how does that impact the education of children? How does it impact the learning of children? It's all well and good having a beautiful building with all green, etc., etc. But how does it actually impact the learning of children in a positive or a negative way? So that's the way I'm thinking, and these are just some of the things that I'll link in as I present today. One of the books that I will refer to, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, is called Closing the Learning Gap by Mike Hughes. And basically, in this book, he talks about 10 interesting things about learning, which I will keep referring back to. But this learning gap, for any of you who are not familiar with it, basically the learning gap is the difference between a person's potential and their actual. So there is always a gap, because I don't think anybody will actually reach their maximum potential. But the learning gap, it's about, can we close that gap so it's as small as possible? And that's basically what this book is focusing on. So I'll refer back to this occasionally. So I have a few questions only for you through the night. I promise the rest of the time I'll do the talking. And the question is, what do you know about learning? And I deliberately mention this before I talk about the Green School, just so that we can get our minds working. Research shows that 95% of our understanding of how the brain learns has come in the last 10 years. It's probably 15 years now. So let's say in the last 15 years. And my question to all of us is, when did you go to school? Because if it's more than 10 years ago or 15 years ago, lots has happened in the research relating to learning, and things should be very, very different with the way that children learn and the way that people learn. Again, I'll come back to this in a second. The second question relating to concentration, and I noticed that there's an auction building just outside from here, and this could get a little bit like that as well. Because on concentration, research shows that the average concentration time for children is approximately how many minutes? Anybody? 4, 15, 20, 2, we're going backwards. This is not a good auction. I think you're all looking ahead to the next part, which is about for adults. But the average concentration time for children is approximately age plus 2 minutes. So if you have a 7-year-old child, and maybe some of you do, it's 7 plus 2, which would be 9 minutes. What about for adults? Age minus 2 minutes. For adults, it's around 20 to 25 minutes, so I will keep this presentation to as close to 25 as possible. But the reason I mention both of those two things, which is this slide and this slide, is because from my experience of working in international schools, I often have the case of parents saying to me, "But Mr. Dalton, that's not how I used to do it when I was at school." And I'm sure you may have experienced something similar. And my answer is, good, because we shouldn't still be doing things the same as what did when you went to school. Because we're living in a completely different world now, and education must adapt, and the way that we teach and the way that we learn is changing as well. So that's why I wanted to mention these 2 points to you, because, again, we need to all be thinking slightly differently about the way that people learn also. I don't know if any of you are familiar with a gentleman by the name of Mark Prensky. He's really quite famous in IT. And he refers to our children as being digital natives. And we as adults are digital immigrants. And that makes perfect sense to me. I have a young daughter, and using the iPad to her is just a part of life, whereas for me, I had to learn it. And for children, it's exactly the same. They were born into IT. Now, depending on your age, maybe you were born into IT too, but some of the older people in here will not have been. So we are learning about IT as we go along. And I believe it's very, very similar when it comes to the environment and when it comes to green issues too. Because our children are born into a society where we are trying to promote environmental awareness and green issues. And I believe that our children are environmental natives, and that we, as adults, are environmental immigrants. And I think there's a real similarity there. And the reason I mention this as well is because I think as older people, certainly for me in the school, we cannot be afraid to accept that young children, they know more than us on these issues. And we have to open our minds to that. And we have to be very prepared for maybe someone younger than you in your office, knowing more than you, even though you may be their senior. It's the same in schools. It's embracing that. Don't be afraid of that. It's perfectly acceptable. It's good. It's good that we don't know as much as somebody younger than us as well. So, I think it's very much about this. If we educate the children, they will go home and educate their parents. It doesn't have to be their parents. It could be you could go to your office tomorrow and you could educate somebody on something small also. So, the three things I would like to speak to you about this evening relating to the Green School are basically this model for environmental sustainability in education. And then I'd like to share with you a very short video that two students from the Green School created, and then look at suggestions or ideas that we can all do in our general day-to-day lives as well. And then hopefully you won't have too many questions for me. This is how every day starts if you're a student at Green School. If you're a teacher at Green School. Actually, I shouldn't say that, because I was led to believe that a few months ago that lightning struck this bridge, and it may have I think the bridge may have gone and is being repaired, but when I was there, this was how every day started. You were crossing this bridge over the Agong River, and before you even start a school day, regardless of whether you're a student, a cleaner, a teacher, etc., you're having nice thoughts. I don't believe that anybody who is looking at that photograph does not think that that's a very pleasant photograph. And for me, when it comes to children learning, they've got to have positive thoughts. They've got to be happy. If they're not happy, they're not ready to learn. You don't have to agree with things that I say, by the way. It's just, again, is my opinion. But that's what I genuinely believe. And I think that walk into school gives a child a positive energy. They're ready to learn. And I'll just share with you a number of photographs of the school itself. That was me just before. It must have been on a weekend because I've not got my shirt and tie on. That's a photograph of the heart of school. An aerial shot of 2 classrooms with the surrounding gardens for each classroom. And again, these are real photographs, and this is a real school. Classrooms without walls. There are no walls whatsoever within Green School. There is no air conditioning whatsoever within Green School. It's been designed for natural airflow, and it does actually work. But the beauty as well of this is that often, if you cast your minds back to when you were at school, you were probably in 4 brick walls, and if you even stared out of the window, your teacher would probably shout at you and scold you. I'm sure you can imagine if you're sat in this classroom, you're surrounded by potential distractions. But research, as I will mention a little bit later, shows that that is not the case. Just because there are distractions there, children are actually proving, research is showing, that a child's concentration level can be increased by having such a surrounding environment, because you are a part of that environment. You are not looking through a window, etc. And it is not uncommon, I promise you, for an animal of some type, insects, sheep, goats, snakes, to just make their way through your classroom. And the children are not jumping up screaming. The flow of the lesson stops, and the teachers embrace that, and the lesson stops, and you start to talk about that child, that particular animal's environment, and what can we learn from that. And that's one of the great things about the curriculum at the school, is that it isn't fixed so rigidly that the teachers are frightened to sway from the actual curriculum. You can actually say, well, let's stop and let's research this particular animal or this particular insect, etc. And it really is wonderful, and it's really beautiful as well to see. Everything is bamboo, including the furniture, the chairs and the tables, etc. Now, if I refer back to the Closing the Learning Gap book, the 10 exciting things, or the 10 interesting things, I think this phrase is quite an interesting one for us to read. I'll read it to you as well at the same time as you look at it. People learn best when they are at ease and feel comfortable with their surroundings and feel switched on and ready to learn, often referred to as relaxed alertness. I'll go back to that, what I said earlier, as if a child is feeling comfortable in their environment, if they're happy in their environment, they're ready to learn. If they feel threatened in any way, they are not ready to learn, and they will not learn. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchical triangle, you know, there's certain levels there of when a child, we've got to be well fed, we've got to be well rested, etc. We've got to feel safe. Now I'm ready to learn, etc. And this is very much the same here. And the Green School very much focuses on this relaxed alertness. There's no threatening examinations, etc., which the children often can be terrified of, etc. Again, that environment is not a threatening environment, quite the contrary. So if we look at the curriculum, because we have to keep in mind that this is actually a real school. There's the core subjects, then there's green studies, and there's creative arts. Now, as a mathematician, I have a very left-sided brain. I like things to be logical and systematic. So for me, the top one of English, mathematics and science is so crucial, because children on the international circuit, they may only be in a school for 1 or 2 or 3 years before they move to another country, anywhere in the world. But they need to be able to transfer the maths, English and science skills with them, so that they are at a similar compatible level with other countries. So for me, that was absolutely a crucial part of the curriculum. The middle one is the one really that makes the school unique, and it's this green studies. And it's where every day, every child for 1 hour per day was actually getting dirty. They were getting dirty, they were doing things, they were directly connecting with their surroundings, with the environment, etc. And you'll see more of that in a second. And finally, the creative arts of art, music, drama, etc. was really a big part of the school too. But that should be a part of any school as well. So for me, the top 2 should be happening anyway. It's the middle one that's really the difference. And again, a very brief snapshot of some Green Studies curriculum is that throughout, this would go all the way down to grade 12. But there was a progressive program of what the children will do each year in each aspect of Green Studies. going back again to this book and relating to Green Studies, I find this to be a really fascinating one, which does apply. Do we have any teachers in the house, by the way? Okay. You're either going to think I'm crazy or great. But this phrase I like a lot, and it's one that you should take back to your schools. And it's this idea of recognising that we're all different. Nobody is better than anybody else, nobody is worse, we're just different. And we have different talents. And it's this, if I can't learn the way you teach, can you teach the way I learn? Because what teachers have a terrible tendency to do is to teach children the way that they learn. And that is not everybody. So, this very, very much was something that was emphasised massively at the Green School. And again, it can be taken away as well. And again, I'm just sharing with you a few different photographs of the types of things that were happening. These are not staged photographs, by the way, I promise you. And again, going back to the book and relating it to the school itself, when children can't see the point of learning, when they don't want to learn, they almost certainly won't. Now, I don't believe that this just relates to children. I think it relates to everybody in this room. If you're going to work every day and you're not enjoying going to work every day, you're probably not very productive. Or you're not as productive as what you should be, or what you could be. And that's where, if you're not, you need to really reflect on that and say, why is that the case? Why are you not enjoying going to work every day? And try and do something about this. And again, if we put learning into context, again, I'm referring back to the book here, children remember context much better than they do content. Again, it's referring back to latest research on this. This is not just somebody's idea. Research is behind all of these things. About the brain remembering context quite naturally. It's proficient in remembering anything that's unusual or exaggerated, dramatic, emotional, unexpected. And I'm sure you can relate to that too, even from when you was a child. Did something shocking happen in one of your classrooms? Then I bet you remember it. And again, that's a silly one. And what's happening at the Green School is the learning is very, very real. It's not just reading from a book, etc. Children are connected with the theory and the practice become one. And you can't read these types of things in books. This is one of my favourite photographs actually, and this boy, obviously I can't mention his name, but this boy I will relate to a little bit later when it comes to attitudes and behaviours of children and how the environment can link with the attitudes and behaviours of children. And what happens to the food that is produced? Well, I think a few people have been to the Green School, and if you've ever had your lunch there, you'll realise the food is absolutely fantastic. And everything that you eat is grown at the school. Not all by the children, they do have some farmers as well, but the children think that everything they are eating, they're the ones that they've grown it, which is great, isn't it? But they are allowed to fail, they are allowed to make mistakes, and isn't that a massive part of the learning process? Removing the fear of failure. As long as you are learning and reflecting on why that failed, and can we do it better next time, etc. So all of the children are involved in the growing of the vegetables and the fruits, etc. And very much this case of learning by doing. Now then, I think we like this one. In every toilet there are two toilets. There's a toilet for number one, and there's a toilet for number two. And you must not get them wrong. I've just realised something. Can I go back to... Would I be okay to say that I could have phrased this not learning by doing, but maybe learning by pooing? So everything in the school is recycled. I mean, everything you can think of. So it's just a part of the life, and it's this garbage to garden cycle, which the children are just a part of. It's a part of their life, and it's how they understand things to happen. there are bins everywhere, like this time. Okay? And again, the learning by doing, where children are actually doing modelling of situations, and then they do develop that